Here we are. This is where William Parker's house stood, right out in the middle of this plowed field.
Wow.
In fact, Sarah's house was right over there, about a quarter of a mile away. As you know, this was the center of the Underground Railroad in this area. And William Parker was himself a fugitive slave.
Right.
And Parker also headed essentially an Underground Railroad militia made up of African Americans who were determined to fight rather than to allow anybody to be carried back into slavery.
It seems that the state of affairs with slavery had gotten worse.
Well, the Fugitive Slave Law was one of the nastiest, cruelest pieces of legislation ever passed by the United States Congress.
The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 required the federal government to help slave owners and bounty hunters capture fugitive slaves in northern free states and return them to slavery. Because accused runaways weren't represented in court, even free men were dragged away and sold without any chance to defend themselves. This contentious law also required citizens like Sarah to turn in fugitive slaves and threatened to imprison anyone who refused. Suddenly, no African Americans were guaranteed freedom, and the Underground Railroad became more important than ever.
So basically, the federal government was saying it was illegal not to return slaves that had run away.
That's precisely what the law was.
That's shocking.
The Fugitive Slave Law basically turbocharged the abolitionist movement. The Underground Railroad was the radical edge of abolitionism. They were the people who were willing to put their lives on the line, breaking the law in order to help fugitives.
So what was the Christiana resistance?
It happened September 11th, 1851. There was a slave owner named Edward Gorsuch. Several of his slaves had run away from Maryland.
Okay.
Edward Gorsuch learned that two of those fugitives were here in Lancaster County, and Gorsuch came up here seeking those fugitive slaves, and he traced them to William Parker's house.
Right on my family's farm.
Yes, in fact, Sarah could see and probably hear everything happening here out her window.
Oh my gosh. So I'm wondering if you have any information about her involvement.
I do. This is an excerpt from one of the best and earliest accounts of the Underground Railroad, written just after the Civil War.
For some days before this conflict, reports afloat that an attack was soon to be made on Parker's house. Sarah Pownall had a conversation with him the night before the riot and urged him, if slaveholders should come, not to lead the colored people to resist the fugitive slave law by force of arms, but to escape to Canada. He replied, the laws for personal protection are not made for us, and we are not bound to obey them. If a fight occurs, I want the whites to keep away. They have a country and may obey the laws, but we have no country. Wow.
Quite a statement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite a statement.
He's making it clear that he and his group are going to fight.
And Sarah and Levi Pownall were Quakers, so they did not believe in violence. So after this conversation, what did William Parker do? Did he listen to Sarah, or did he stay and try to fight a battle?
He armed himself. On the morning of September 11th, Edward Gorsuch and the posse that he'd collected in Philadelphia, now that included members of his own family, his son Dickinson Gorsuch, and a number of police, they came up the road, you see across the valley here. They surrounded the house. They're armed. Parker and his men and his very brave wife, Eliza, are in the house. They're all armed. When it becomes pretty clear that there's going to be a confrontation, Eliza, who herself is an escaped slave, takes a horn and trumpets across the valley. Maybe as many as 60 people, mostly African Americans, drop their work implements and they come running here to the house, and including...
So it was basically a battle.
It was a battle.
Oh my God. I mean, I can't imagine being Sarah and Levi Pownall looking out their window and seeing basically a battle on their land.
I think it must have hurt them,
Yeah.
as people of deep Quaker conviction, to see violence about to happen on their property right in front of them and to be powerless to stop it.
Right. So tell me what happened when the battle started.
The two groups collided outside the house. Shots were fired on both sides. Edward Gorsuch was killed. His son Dickinson was almost killed, shot, beaten to the ground. There was a melee. The police ran.
Oh, my goodness.
Most people were frightened of black people, and they were frightened of black people with weapons in their hands, beating, shooting white people, even though
they were defending themselves.
Even though they were defending themselves. The fugitives were not captured. They were saved and they were protected.
That's amazing. So what was the aftermath of the Christiana resistance?
Everybody knew about this.
Right.
Newspapers all across the United States reported on what happened here. President Fillmore is following it. The president's chief advisor told him there has to be a reaction. The government has to act.
Okay.
This led to a reign of terror in Lancaster County. It was said at the time that Negroes were hunted like partridges across Lancaster County. Their homes were invaded, people were dragged out, arrested, interrogated, beaten. White abolitionists were also dragged in by the authorities. People didn't know what was going to happen to them.
So to be an abolitionist at this time must have been dangerous. Wow. You know, you always think Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but there were so many people that assisted.
People like William Parker, his wife Eliza Parker, emancipated themselves.
Right.
They didn't wait for Abraham Lincoln, and they did it with the assistance of people like Sarah Pownall.
Okay, so the Christiana resistance happened here. My ancestors are right over there on that farm. What did they do?
That is a good question, and there's a lot to say about it. Let's go over to Moore's Memorial Library in Christiana, and I think you're going to see things that will interest you.